So when does your little hobby start making real money? My brother Jasper asked, laughing through a mouthful of filet mignon. The entire table joined in. My mother, my father, even my grandmother. They were all toasting the genius leadership of Teknova's mystery CEO, the person who'd just been named Forbes Innovator of the Year. What they didn't know, what none of them could possibly imagine as they raised their champagne glasses in that five-star restaurant, was that they were toasting me. I'm Nina Hartley, and I'm about to tell you how I destroyed my family's world without them ever seeing my face. Before I show you how 15 years of being invisible became the most dangerous weapon I could ever build, drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been so underestimated that people forgot you were even in the room? Because that's exactly what my family did. And if this story makes you believe in perfectly calculated revenge, hit that subscribe button and like this video. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. The Rosewood Hotel dining room smelled like money and overcooked asparagus. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they made you feel small just by existing underneath them. My family had reserved the private corner booth, the one with velvet curtains and a view of the city skyline that cost extra just to look at. I sat at the end of the table. I always sat at the end. My father, Wesley Hartley, sat at the head like a king on a throne made of leather and privilege. His suit probably cost more than my entire month's rent, and he knew it. He smiled at everyone except me. To his right was my mother, Colette, who spent more time checking her reflection in her wine glass than she did looking at her own daughter. My brother Jasper sat across from me, his perfect teeth flashing every time he laughed at his own jokes. He worked in commercial real estate, which meant he spent his days convincing rich people to buy buildings they'd never actually use. My parents thought he was a genius. And then there was Aunt Beatrice, my father's sister, who showed up to every family dinner just to remind everyone that she married a senator. She wore pearls like weapons. I wore a cardigan I'd bought at a thrift store 3 years ago. Nina, my mother said, finally acknowledging my existence. You're so quiet tonight. Still doing that, what will you do again? I could feel my face getting hot. I run a tech consulting business, Mom. I've told you this. Jasper snorted into his drink. Consulting. That's what people call it when they don't have a real job. The table erupted in polite laughter. The kind that sounds sophisticated but cuts just as deep as any insult. Now, my father said, raising his hand like he was quieting a courtroom. Let's not be cruel. Nina's trying. It's admirable, really. Not everyone has Jasper's drive or talent. I gripped my fork so hard I thought it might bend. I mean, Aunt Beatrice added, leaning forward with fake concern dripping from her voice, how much can you really make doing computer stuff from your apartment? Do you even have clients? I opened my mouth to respond, but my father cut me off. Beatrice, don't embarrass the girl. She's doing her best with what she has. He turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We're very proud of you, sweetheart. Even if it's just a hobby. A hobby. 15 years of 18-hour days. 15 years of coding until my fingers cramped and my eyes burned. 15 years of building something from absolutely nothing while living in a studio apartment with a broken heater and a landlord who wouldn't fix the sink. A hobby. I looked down at my plate. The steak I'd ordered sat there untouched, probably cold by now. I'd only ordered it because my father insisted. Don't embarrass me by ordering a salad, he'd whispered when we first sat down. People will think I don't feed you. Speaking of real success, my mother said, her voice rising with excitement, did everyone see the Forbes article? Teknova's CEO was named Innovator of the Year. Anonymous, of course. So mysterious. Jasper pulled out his phone and started reading from the screen. It says here that under this CEO's leadership, Teknova has grown to a $3.2 billion valuation in just 5 years. 5 years. And nobody even knows who this person is. That's the kind of genius I respect. My father nodded approvingly. That's real power, son. Building an empire so big you don't even need your name on it. That's what separates the leaders from from everyone else. He didn't look at me when he said it, but he didn't have to. I heard rumors it might be a woman, Aunt Beatrice said, wrinkling her nose like the idea was distasteful. Can you imagine? A woman running a tech company that big without anyone knowing. Unlikely, my father said, waving his hand dismissively. Women in tech always make it about themselves. All that empowerment nonsense. No, this CEO is smart. Calculated. That's a man's strategy. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger, something colder. I looked at each of them. My father so confident in his ignorance. My mother so shallow she could barely see past her own reflection. Jasper so smug he didn't realize his entire career was built on our father's connections. Aunt Beatrice, decorating herself with her husband's accomplishments like they were her own. And then I looked at myself. Nina Hartley. Invisible, underestimated and forgotten. Also known as N. Hart. Also known as the founder and CEO of Technova. Also known as the person they were toasting while mocking me in the same breath. I picked up my champagne glass. To Technova, I said quietly. Jasper raised his glass with a grin. Finally, you say something interesting. To Technova. To real success. They all clinked glasses. I smiled. They had no idea what was coming. That dinner wasn't the first time. It was just the loudest. When I was 16, I built my first software program. It was a simple inventory management system for small businesses, nothing fancy, but it worked. I showed it to my father thinking maybe, just maybe, he'd see me differently. He looked at it for 5 seconds and said, "That's nice, sweetheart. But you should focus on finding a husband. Math isn't attractive to women." When I was 22 and graduated top of my class from MIT with a degree in computer science, my mother threw me a party. Not because she was proud, but because it looked good. The entire event was about her. She spent the whole night telling people how hard it was to raise a daughter who was so focused on computers instead of making friends. Jasper got a job at our father's firm right out of college. No interview. No resume. Just a corner office and a 6-figure salary because his last name was Hartley. I got a handshake and advice to network better. When I started Technova, I didn't tell them. What was the point? They wouldn't understand. They wouldn't care. So I worked in silence. I worked from a desk I'd found on the sidewalk. I coded through migraines and panic attacks. I pitched to investors who looked at me like I was wasting their time. 27 rejections before I got my first yes. But I didn't quit. I couldn't. Because quitting would mean they were right about me. The company grew slowly at first. Then faster. Then exponentially. I hired people smarter than me. I built systems that ran themselves. I stayed anonymous because I didn't want the attention. I wanted the work to speak for itself. And it did. By year 3, Technova was worth $400 million. By year 5, $3.2 billion. I owned 73% of it. I was worth over $2 billion. And my family had no idea. At every family dinner, every holiday, every birthday, they asked me the same questions. Still doing that computer thing? Have you thought about getting a real job? When are you going to settle down and start a family? I smiled. I nodded. I let them think I was struggling. Because the invisibility they forced on me became my greatest advantage. But that dinner at Rosewood was different. That was the night I realized something important. They didn't just underestimate me. They worshipped the version of me they didn't know existed. And I could use that. 2 days after the dinner, I was sitting in my office on the 43rd floor of the building I owned but had never told my family about. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. My assistant, Bryn, knocked twice before entering. "The interview request from Business Weekly just came through again," she said, holding a tablet. "They want to profile the CEO. They're offering the cover." "Decline," I said without looking up from my screen. "Nina, they've been asking for 2 years. At some point, I'll decide when the world gets to see my face. Today is not that day." Bryn nodded and left. I stared at the skyline. Somewhere out there, my family was going about their day, convinced I was barely scraping by. My father was probably closing some mediocre deals and feeling proud of himself. Jasper was probably taking credit for work someone else did. My mother was probably planning another charity event where she could wear an expensive dress and pretend to care about poor people. And I was here, running an empire they couldn't fathom. But I wanted more than success. I wanted them to feel what I felt every single day growing up. I wanted them to know what it's like to be invisible. My phone buzzed. A text from Jasper. "Hey sis, Dad's birthday is next month. Don't forget to get him something nice. Maybe use some of that consulting money that..." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I started planning. My father's 60th birthday was going to be held at the Heritage Club, the most exclusive venue in the city. Membership costs $100,000 a year just to be on the waiting list. My father had been a member for 30 years and never let anyone forget it. The theme was legacy. Because of course it was. I received my invitation 3 weeks in advance. Cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. My name was misspelled. They'd written Nora instead of Nina. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was focused. I called Bryn into my office. I need you to set up a meeting with the Heritage Club's events coordinator, I said. She raised an eyebrow. I want to sponsor an event. Technova doesn't do event sponsorships. We do now. It took one phone call. The Heritage Club nearly fell over themselves when they heard Technova wanted to partner with them. They offered us their biggest ballroom, their best catering, anything we wanted. I told them exactly what I wanted. I want to sponsor the upcoming 60th birthday event for Wesley Hartley. There was a pause on the other end of the line. We can certainly make that arrangement. May I ask why Technova is interested in this particular event? Let's call it a personal investment, I said. They didn't ask questions after that. Money talks. Anonymous money talks even louder. I had them send Wesley a letter. It was brief and professional. Dear Mr. Hartley, congratulations on your milestone birthday. Technova is honored to sponsor your celebration as part of our community investment initiative. Please accept our compliments for the venue, catering, and entertainment. We hope you enjoy your evening. The Office of the CEO Technova. When my mother called me, she was practically screaming with excitement. Nina, did you hear? Technova is sponsoring your father's party. Can you believe it? The CEO must have heard about your father's reputation in the business community. This is incredible. I smiled into the phone. That's amazing, Mom. Dad must be so proud. Oh, he is. He keeps saying he knew his legacy would attract the right kind of attention. This is everything we've ever worked for. Everything we've worked for. Mom. I let her talk for 20 more minutes before I finally hung up. The next part of the plan required precision. I contacted every major business publication that had been trying to interview me for years. Business Weekly, Forbes, The Wall Street Journal. I told them the same thing. I'm ready to reveal my identity. But I'm going to do it on my terms. At a private event. You'll get the exclusive. But you have to wait for my signal. They agreed instantly. Then I made one more call. To the Heritage Club. I'd like to attend the event I'm sponsoring, I said. Of course, Ms. Hart. We'll have a VIP table ready for you. No, I said. I don't want anyone to know I'm there. I'll sit with the family. I want to see their reaction when they realize who's been sponsoring them. There was a confused pause. I'm sorry, I don't understand. You will, I said and hung up. The final piece was the hardest. I had to make sure I looked forgettable. I went to the same thrift store where I'd bought my cardigan. I found a plain black dress that fit poorly and shoes that were slightly scuffed. I pulled my hair back into a bun so tight it gave me a headache. When I looked in the mirror, I saw exactly what my family always saw. Nothing. Perfect. The Heritage Club ballroom looked like something out of a movie. Ice sculptures shaped like dollar signs. A live orchestra. Tables covered in white silk and centerpieces made of orchids that probably cost more than most people's rent. I arrived early and slipped into my seat at the family table. My mother glanced at me and frowned. Nina, you're wearing that? It's all I have, Mom. She sighed like I'd just told her I had a terminal illness. Well, try to stay in the background tonight. This is your father's moment. I will, I said. And I meant it. The room was filled with guests. Business associates. Politicians. People who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. My father stood at the center of it all, shaking hands, laughing too loud, soaking in the attention. Jasper was talking to a group of investors, probably lying about his accomplishments. Aunt Beatrice was showing pictures of her senator husband to anyone who would listen. And I sat at the end of the table. At 8 o'clock the lights dimmed. A screen lowered from the ceiling. My father's face appeared larger than life as a montage of his achievements played. Photos of him at charity events he didn't actually care about. Clips of him giving speeches about leadership he didn't practice. The crowd applauded. Then the screen changed. A new logo appeared. Technova. The room went silent. A voice came through the speakers. Come. Professional. Good evening. My name is Nina Hartley. And I am the founder and CEO of Technova. My father's face went white. My mother dropped her champagne glass. Jasper's mouth fell open. The screen showed everything. My MIT diploma. Photos of me in my studio apartment, coding at 3 in the morning. Articles I'd written under pseudonyms. Patents I'd filed. The growth trajectory of Teknova from $0 to $3.2 billion. And then it showed tonight. This event was sponsored by Teknova as part of a personal investment. Because the man you're celebrating tonight is my father. And for my entire life he has told me that I would never amount to anything. That my work was a hobby. That success was something only men like him and my brother could achieve. The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. So tonight I want to say thank you, Dad. Thank you for underestimating me so completely that I was free to build an empire without you ever noticing. Thank you for making me invisible because that invisibility became my greatest weapon. And thank you for teaching me that the best revenge isn't anger. Its success is so undeniable that it rewrites your entire legacy. The screen went dark. The lights came back on. Every single person in that room was staring at me. I stood up. I walked to the center of the ballroom. I looked at my father. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said. Then I walked out. Behind me I could hear the chaos starting. Reporters rushing forward. My mother's voice, shrill and desperate, trying to explain. Jasper shouting something I couldn't make out. But I didn't look back. I walked through the marble lobby, pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped into the cool night air. My phone buzzed. Texts from reporters. Requests for interviews. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly wanting to reconnect. I turned my phone off. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the building where my father's party was falling apart. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn his approval. All the nights I'd cried because I thought I wasn't good enough. And I realized something. I didn't need his approval anymore. I never did. 3 weeks later my father called me. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. "Nina," he said. His voice was different. Smaller. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About everything. About what I said. About how I treated you." "I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't ask," I said. "You spent my entire life telling me I wasn't good enough. And the only reason you're calling now is because the world knows who I am. If I was still anonymous, you'd still be calling my work a hobby." He was quiet for a long time. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "I don't need your apology, Dad. I needed your support. I needed you to see me. But you never did. And now it's too late." I hung up. I won't lie and say it didn't hurt. Part of me still wanted him to be proud. Part of me still wanted to be his daughter, not just the CEO he couldn't ignore. But I also knew that some people only respect power. And I'd rather have power than approval. Jasper never called. My mother sent a long email that was mostly about how embarrassed she was. Aunt Beatrice apparently told people I'd tricked the family. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I did what I've always done. I worked. Teknova kept growing. I hired more people. I launched new products. I stayed anonymous to the world but visible to the people who mattered. And every time I walked past a mirror I saw someone I was proud of. Not because my family finally knew who I was, but because I knew who I was. So that's my story. The story of how being invisible became my superpower. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been told you weren't good enough, if you've ever had to prove yourself to people who should have believed in you from the start, drop a comment below. Tell me your story. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just becoming everything they said you couldn't be. Hit subscribe if you believe in that kind of justice. And remember, the people who underestimate you are just giving you the element of surprise.